Maple Creek wasn't a town you found by accident. It sat quietly between the hills of West Virginia, all cracked sidewalks and wind-worn porches, the kind of place where you could hear the church bells, even with your windows closed. And it was there, on a foggy September morning 10 years ago, that Melanie handed me her son, not with tenderness, not with a kiss on the forehead, just a blanket-wrapped newborn in my arms and eyes that wouldn't meet mine. "I can't do this, Martha," she said. "You're better at this than I'll ever be." Before I could form a question, before I could even speak her name again, she turned, walked down my driveway, and got into a rusted blue sedan with out-of-state plates. She never looked back. I stood there on the porch of my two-bedroom house, in my slippers, holding the boy who had my son's eyes and a name I hadn't even known they'd chosen, Jamie. Melanie didn't leave a note, no birth certificate, just a diaper bag, a bottle that had gone cold, and a whisper of perfume I would forever associate with abandonment. My son, Mark, was halfway through basic training when it happened. He'd enlisted to pay for college, to escape Melanie, maybe even to prove something to himself. When I called, he sounded dazed. "She left?" he asked. "Just like that?" "Just like that," I answered, rocking the baby against my shoulder. Mark didn't ask me to raise Jamie. He didn't beg or plead or make promises. He just said, "Thank you, Mom." I don't know what else to do. Neither did I. But I knew how to hold a baby. I knew how to warm formula and change diapers and sing lullabies at 2 a.m. I had done it before. With Mark. And I would do it again. The town had questions, of course. Whispers at the market, raised eyebrows at church. But I just kept my head down and my arms open. Jamie was mine now, not by blood alone, but by every bottle, every scraped knee, every bedtime story whispered into a dark room. And though I didn't know it yet. That morning, Melanie vanished wasn't just the day I became a grandmother. It was the day I became his only mother. The rhythm of our life settled in quietly, like an old song I hadn't heard in years, but somehow still knew the words to. Jamie was more than my grandson. He was my morning, my noon, my reason. The porch lights stayed on after dark. Every weekday, I waited outside Maple Creek Elementary at 3 p.m. sharp. Rain or shine, he'd come bursting through the red double doors, backpack half-zipped, hair sticking up like he'd been in a wind tunnel, eyes searching for me, and always finding me. "Grandma!" he used to shout. Until one day, he didn't. That day, he ran into my arms, wrapped his little fingers around my neck, and whispered, "Mom." I froze. He didn't correct himself. Neither did I. From that day on, it just stayed. Like his favorite blanket or the way he always slept with one sock on and one off. He called me Mom, and it didn't feel like a mistake. It felt like truth. And the truth was, I did everything a mother would do. I packed his lunches with the little notes tucked inside. "You've got this, kiddo." I helped him sound out spelling words at the kitchen table, patient as a saint even when he insisted night should be spelled night. I sat through every cold Saturday morning soccer game, clutching a thermos of cocoa and cheering even when he missed the ball by a mile. At night, I sang the same lullaby I once sang to his father. "Hush now, baby. Don't you cry. Mama's gonna sing you a lullaby." Jamie didn't know the difference. He didn't know Melanie had driven away without a backward glance, or that his father sent birthday gifts wrapped in military-issue tape from bases halfway across the world. He just knew love, and I made sure that love was loud, daily, unshakable. People in town stopped calling me his grandma. I was Jamie's mom, and I wore it like armor. There were hard days, of course. Times when I worried about money, about Jamie's questions as he grew older, about whether love alone could fill in the holes someone else left behind. But whenever I saw him curled up on the couch with his head in my lap, humming to himself, safe and warm, I knew I was enough. I didn't just raise him, I became his entire world. And he became mine. It was a Thursday. I remember because I'd just pulled a tray of cornbread muffins out of the oven for Jamie's school bake sale. The knock came at 4:17 p.m. I wasn't expecting anyone. Not a delivery, not a neighbor, not anyone from town. When I opened the door, the sunlight hit her face first. Long, dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, red lipstick slightly smudged, a handbag clutched too tightly in her hand. It took me a second, maybe two, and then the years fell away like dust off an old photo frame. Melanie. She didn't wait for me to speak. Instead, she smiled. But it wasn't real. I'd seen enough fake pleasantries in my life to know the difference. This one had edges. This one had teeth. "Hi, Martha," she said, like we were old friends. I said nothing. "I'm here for my son," she added, voice smooth but rehearsed. "Jamie." The name in her mouth sounded foreign, performed, like an actor playing a role she'd never earned. I gripped the door frame tighter. My heart beat louder than the ticking wall clock in the kitchen. It had been 10 years, 10 Christmases, 10 first days of school, 10 bedtime stories. And not once had she called. Not once had she written, not even on his birthdays. And now she stood here with fresh mascara and a practiced grin, asking for her son. "He's not here," I said, though I could hear him laughing in the living room behind me. The sound sliced straight through me. She leaned slightly to the side, trying to peer past me. "I just want what's mine." Mine. As if love could be measured in DNA. As if biology made you a mother. My voice didn't shake when I answered. "You left him. I raised him." She tilted her head. "You don't have the right to keep him from me." Now I laughed. Just once. Bitter and low. "And what gives you the right to show up after a decade like you left him at daycare, Melanie?" She flinched. "I made mistakes," she said, the smile faltering. "But I'm ready to fix them." "You're 10 years too late." The wind picked up behind her, rustling the hem of her coat. "I'll be back," she said, voice hardening. "With the law on my side." I didn't answer. I just closed the door. But even as it latched behind her, I knew this wasn't over. She'd come to reclaim something she'd never earned. And I was going to have to fight to protect everything I had built. The second time she came, I didn't answer right away. I was hoping she'd give up. But Melanie wasn't the type to disappear twice. I opened the door with Jamie standing just behind me, fresh from school, still holding his math folder in one hand and a half-eaten granola bar in the other. She smiled wide this time, practiced, eager. But there was a stiffness to it, like someone trying too hard to look casual in a suit that didn't quite fit. "Hi, sweetheart," she said, kneeling a little. "Do you remember me?" Jamie froze. He didn't move closer, didn't blink, just stared at her with the kind of narrowed suspicion kids are surprisingly good at when something doesn't feel right. Then, slowly, he leaned into my side and whispered, "Grandma, who is that?" Melanie's smile cracked at the edges. Her hands fluttered nervously, then dropped to her sides. "Jamie, it's me. I'm your mother." Jamie took a small step back. He looked up at me, brows furrowed. "That's not my mom. You are." I heard it. She heard it, and the silence that followed was louder than any scream. Melanie blinked hard, like she was trying to keep her composure intact, but her voice came out thinner than before. "I had to go away for a while," she said, "but I'm back now, and I want to get to know you." Jamie turned his face into my side and didn't speak. "I think that's enough for today," I said calmly, stepping forward and gently closing the screen door between us. Melanie didn't move. She stood there for a second, as if she hadn't quite calculated how rejection would feel coming from a child. "I'll be back," she said again, but this time there was no heat in her voice, just a frayed thread of desperation. "I know," I replied. She walked off slowly, her heels clicking against the driveway like clock hands ticking toward something inevitable. Inside, I sat Jamie on the couch and tucked a blanket around his legs. "Who was that lady, really?" he asked. "She's someone from before you were old enough to remember," I said gently. He tilted his head. "Was she trying to take me away?" I paused, and then I told the truth. "She might try, but she won't. I promise." He nodded once, trusting me the way only a child can. Then he reached for his math worksheet, like nothing had happened. But something had. Because a woman who hadn't seen her son in 10 years had just found out. She wasn't his mother anymore. Not in the ways that mattered. The next morning, she didn't knock. She simply stood at the edge of the porch, as if that sliver of elevation gave her some kind of leverage. I opened the door slowly. Jamie still upstairs getting dressed for school. The air between us was cold, not from the weather, but from whatever she was about to say. She held out a manila envelope. "From my attorney," she said, voice clipped, businesslike. I didn't take it at first, just stared at her hand. "It's not personal," she added, as if that made it better. "I'm just doing what's right." I took the envelope and closed the door without saying another word. At the kitchen table, I opened it with trembling fingers. The letterhead was crisp, expensive. The language was sharp and clinical. To Martha L. Hayes, as legal representation for Ms. Melanie Rogers, biological mother of Jamie Rogers, born May 17, 2014. This notice serves to inform you of her intention to seek full legal custody of said child. Ms. Rogers asserts her parental rights under state and federal law and has filed an official petition for a custody hearing to be scheduled within the next 30 days. I read it 3 times. Each time, the words dug deeper. Biological mother, intention to seek full custody, official petition. I wasn't prepared for this. I had no formal adoption papers. Mark had never signed over rights. Melanie had vanished before any paperwork could be processed, and I, foolishly, lovingly, had believed that love would be enough. I was wrong. Jamie walked into the kitchen rubbing sleep from his eyes, his socks mismatched, his shirt inside out. He smiled at me. "Can I have waffles?" I slid the papers under a magazine before he could see. "Of course, sweetheart." I poured the batter into the waffle iron with hands that couldn't stop shaking. The scent of vanilla filled the kitchen, but it didn't comfort me like it usually did. The walls of this house had protected us for 10 years. Now they felt paper thin. I sat across from Jamie as he ate, watching him chatter about a science project he was building with popsicle sticks. And all I could think was, how do you explain to a child that someone who never stayed is trying to take them away? That night, after Jamie fell asleep, I sat in the living room with the legal papers spread out in front of me like a battlefield map. The words blurred. but my mind was clearer than it had been in days. I didn't cry. Instead, I remembered. I remembered the first night I brought him home. Just 8 pounds of new breath, wrapped in a second-hand blanket. He wouldn't stop crying, and I walked the length of the hallway 100 times, singing every hymn I knew, until he finally fell asleep on my chest, his tiny fingers curled into the collar of my flannel shirt. I remembered the fever when he was 7 months old, 104 degrees. I sat on the floor of the emergency room for 8 hours with him bundled against my chest, whispering, "Stay with me, baby. Just stay with me." I remembered the ear infections, the teething, the night terrors, the time he ate a Lego, the time he wouldn't sleep unless I left the closet light on, the time he drew stick figures of us at school and labeled them me and Mom. Melanie wasn't there for any of it. She didn't rock him through the screaming nights or hold his sweaty hands in the doctor's office. She didn't teach him to tie his shoes or write his name in big, uneven letters on the fridge. She didn't cheer the first time he stood up without help, or cry when he took 3 wobbly steps toward her and said "Mama" for the first time. Except that it was me he was looking at when he said it. She didn't earn that word. She just gave birth. But I raised him. I sacrificed time, sleep, money, my social life, my peace. I turned down trips, missed holidays, worked part-time at the library just to keep up with new sneakers and school books. No one awarded me for it. No one put my name on a certificate or called me hero. But Jamie knew. He always knew. And that meant more than anything Melanie's lawyers could put on paper. Still, I also knew what the law said. And the law didn't care about lullabies or late-night hospital shifts. It cared about bloodlines, signatures, titles. And that's when I realized something terrifying. If I didn't fight smart, legally, clearly, and fast, I could lose him. Not because I wasn't his mother in every way that mattered, but because I had trusted love to do the job of paperwork. And now, love might not be enough. The next morning, I walked Jamie to school myself, not just to see him through the doors, but because I had an appointment with Ms. Harmon, the school's guidance counselor. She'd known Jamie since kindergarten, always wore floral scarves, and had that warm tone that made even bad news feel like a suggestion. Her office smelled faintly of coffee and cinnamon, and the walls were covered in student art, dragons, family portraits, and crooked smiley faces. She motioned for me to sit. "I saw the name change on the pickup list," she said gently. "Jamie told us someone new showed up." I nodded. His biological mother. She left when he was a baby. Now she's back. And she's filed for custody. Miss Harmon's expression softened into something between sympathy and concern. She doesn't have custody now? Number, I've raised him since he was 2 weeks old. I'm the only mother he's ever known. But we never formalized it through the courts. She nodded slowly, tapping her pen against her clipboard. That's not uncommon. But here's the thing. She leaned forward. Without a court order, she can't take him from school. Not legally. As far as our system is concerned, the last known legal guardian is you. But she hesitated. If she wins custody in court and provides documentation, we would have to comply. There's no choice in that. I swallowed hard. So if she shows up now, we won't release him, not without a signed court order or a formal custody document. But you should know, once this goes to court, things can move fast. Judges don't always see the whole story. They see paperwork, DNA, a timeline. Sometimes that's enough. I nodded, the ache settling deep behind my ribs. I don't want Jamie to be scared. I don't even know how much of this he understands. Ms. Harmon's voice softened again. He's smart. He understands more than you think. And he trusts you. That matters. I left the office with a pamphlet she'd printed out for legal aid and a hand-scribbled list of family lawyers who might offer a free consultation. Outside, the sky was gray. The wind picked up across the playground, rustling the flags and the tops of the trees. I watched Jamie through the window of his classroom. He was drawing. Focused. Innocent. And I made a promise right there. If Melanie wanted to fight, she was going to have to go through a woman who knew how to hold the line. It was just after 9 p.m. Jamie had brushed his teeth, fed his goldfish, and crawled under the quilt my mother had stitched the year I was born. I had just turned off the lamp when I heard his voice in the dark. Grandma? My heart always skipped when he used that word. He only called me that when he was worried. Yes, sweetheart. There was a long pause. Then his voice, small and uncertain. Is that lady really my mom? I froze. The question had hung over us for weeks, waiting in the shadows. And now, there it was. Gentle but heavy, from the mouth of a child trying to make sense of the shifting ground beneath his feet. I turned on the lamp again and sat beside him. His eyes were full. Not crying. Not yet. But close. I reached for his hand. Yes, Jamie. She is your biological mother. She gave birth to you. He looked down. So, you're not my real mom? That word, real, hit me like a stone. But I didn't flinch. I couldn't. I placed a hand over his. Let me ask you something, I said softly. Who made your lunch every day for school? You did. Who took care of you when you were sick? You did. Who sings to you when you can't sleep and reads your books and helps with your homework? You do. I smiled gently. Then let me ask you one more thing, Jamie. Who never left? His bottom lip trembled and tears finally spilled down his cheeks. You didn't, he whispered. You never left. I pulled him into my arms, holding him close, like I had so many nights before. She is part of your story, I said into his hair. But so am I. A big part. And no matter what happens, that will never change. You hear me? He nodded into my shoulder. I love you, Jamie. You are my boy. In every way that counts. His arms tightened around me, and we stayed like that until his breathing slowed and sleep took over. Later, I stood by his door, watching his chest rise and fall under the quilt. Melanie may have returned, but I had never left, and Jamie knew the difference. The first post showed up on a Wednesday evening. I was folding laundry when my phone buzzed with a message from my neighbor's daughter, Hannah, a sweet 20-something who babysat for us a few times. Martha, I think you should see this. It was a screenshot. Melanie, posing with Jamie. Except, Jamie didn't know he was being photographed. The picture was clearly taken outside the school after one of her unscheduled pop-ins. When I had been inside talking to the principal, she stood behind him, smiling, with her hand awkwardly resting on his shoulder while he looked away, mid-step. The caption read, 10 years apart. But a mother's love never fades. So grateful to finally hold my baby again. Second, chances. Miracles happen. Motherhood. I sat down on the edge of the couch, the folded towel in my lap, forgotten. It wasn't just a lie. It was a campaign. Within days, her social media pages were filled with more staged photos. Some old, some recent. Photos she must have saved from when Jamie was an infant, mixed with candid, barely legal snapshots taken from a distance at school pickup or the grocery store. One post featured a picture of a baby Jamie with the caption, 10 years ago, I made the hardest decision a mother can make. But I never stopped loving him. I never stopped hoping. And now he's back in my arms. That was when the comments began. You're so brave. Your son is lucky to have you fighting for him. We all make mistakes. Don't let anyone take this chance from you. She was crafting a story, a redemption arc, but it wasn't hers to tell, because Jamie wasn't in her arms. He was in mine, and he had been every single day for 10 years. I wanted to scream, to post the truth, to share every fever, every scraped knee, every sleepless night and forgotten birthday, to hold the receipts of motherhood up to the digital mob and say, "Look, see me." But I didn't, because I wasn't going to fight her with hashtags and filters. I was going to fight her in court, where facts still mattered, where truth didn't need to be edited for engagement. I took a screenshot of every post, saved every comment. Then I picked up the phone and dialed one of the names Ms. Harmon had written for me on that notepad. "Hello," I said, trying to steady my voice. "I need to speak to a family lawyer. It's urgent." Because if Melanie wanted a public show, I was ready to give her a legal one. It came in a plain white envelope, but it may as well have been made of lead. Official letterhead, clerk of court, custody hearing, 3 weeks from Friday. I sat at the kitchen table and read it twice. The words didn't sting, they burned. Not because I didn't expect it, but because seeing them printed on paper made it real. Jamie was at school. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I reached for the phone and dialed my son. Mark answered on the second ring, breathless. "Mom." Everything okay. He was stationed overseas, somewhere hot, far, and loud. There was static on the line, and in the background, shouting in a language I didn't understand. "I got the summons," I said. "Court's in 3 weeks." There was a pause. "Damn it," he muttered. "I told her to stay away. I told her years ago." "It's not your fault," I interrupted. "I should be there." "I know." Silence again. Mark had always carried guilt for what happened with Melanie, for leaving Jamie with me while he tried to make a life, but I had never once blamed him. "You're a good father," I said softly, "and I'm doing what needs to be done. Just say a prayer for us." He exhaled. More than one. We hung up, and then I sat alone with the envelope in front of me. Alone, but not afraid. Because even if I didn't have a husband or a son by my side in the courtroom, I had something far stronger. The truth. I called my lawyer, Elaine Farrow. She was sharp, steady, and spoke like someone who didn't have time for nonsense. I liked her immediately. "We have 3 weeks," she said. "That's tight, but we'll work with it. We'll need witness letters, documentation of medical care, school records, any communication from Melanie, or lack thereof. Anything that proves you've been this child's primary parent." "I have 10 years of proof," I said. "What I don't have is a court order." "Then we'll make one." After we hung up, I gathered everything. Photos of Jamie's first day of preschool, immunization records, report cards with my signature, birthday cards signed "Love, Mom," drawings he made of me in crayon, complete with my glasses and gray streaks in my hair. It was all there. Proof that motherhood is not just a name on a birth certificate. It's presence. It's sacrifice. It's showing up. Day after day, year after year. The court might call me a guardian, but Jamie called me Mom, and that was the title I intended to defend. I didn't have an army, but I had binders. 2 decades of being a mother had taught me how to organize chaos, whether it was a science fair project the night before it was due, or the legal battle of a lifetime. I cleared the kitchen table and spread it all out. A manila folder labeled medical records. Every doctor's visit, every ER run, every immunization Jamie had ever received, all signed with my name. Another marked school documents, enrollment forms, permission slips, teacher notes, report cards with Guardian Margaret L. Hayes, printed at the top in neat block letters. A photo album with curled edges, Jamie's first toothless smile, his first Halloween costume, a very determined-looking pumpkin, his first steps in the backyard caught mid-wobble. And then I found the letters, tucked in the back of an old drawer, unopened for years. 3 short notes Melanie had written in the early days after she left, all scrawled in a hurry, all addressed to me. I'm not cut out for this. You'll do a better job than I ever could. Please don't hate me. I just couldn't stay. Proof, not just of abandonment, but of surrender. She hadn't just left. She had handed him over. I photocopied the letters and slipped the originals into protective sleeves. My lawyer would need them. Then came the witness list. Orange Circle Mrs. Harmon, the school counselor who'd seen me at every conference for 10 years. Our family doctor, who always called me Mom, in the waiting room without correction. My neighbor Carol, who had babysat Jamie when I worked part-time shifts at the library and had seen Melanie exactly 0 times. Even the librarian downtown, who still remembered the day Jamie got his first card, signed with my last name. Elaine, my lawyer, was impressed. "You've practically built the whole case on your own," she said. "I built a life," I replied. "I just finally put it in a binder." We arranged the documents chronologically, marked important dates, highlighted absences, noted the timelines between Melanie's disappearance and her sudden reappearance, with timestamps, postmarks, and notarized statements. I wasn't just defending my right to keep Jamie. I was presenting a decade-long testimony of motherhood, and the evidence was everywhere, in his handwriting, in his drawings, in the fridge magnets with his spelling tests, in every scraped knee Band-Aid wrapper still stuck to the bottom of the bathroom trash. Melanie had a lawyer, but I had a life. And now, I had a case. It was the night before another meeting with my lawyer. I was packing documents into my tote bag at the kitchen table when I noticed the envelope. It was small, folded unevenly, no stamp. Just my name in Jamie's handwriting, slanted, slightly shaky, but unmistakably his. I opened it, thinking it was one of his usual notes. He liked to leave me little messages. "Thank you for lunch. You're the best mom, even if you're my grandma." But this one was different. Inside was a single piece of lined notebook paper, carefully folded in half. He had written, "Dear Judge, my name is Jamie. I am 10 years old. I live with my grandma, but I call her Mom. She reads with me every night. She makes my pancakes on Saturdays. She was there when I was sick and scared and small. I know the lady who says she is my mom, but I don't feel safe with her. I don't remember her hugs or her voice. I don't want to live with her. I don't want to leave. I want to stay home. Please let me stay." Jamie Rogers Hayes. I covered my mouth with one hand. The other gripped the letter so tight the edges curled under my fingers. He hadn't told me he wrote it, hadn't asked for help with spelling, hadn't asked if it was okay. He just knew that something big was coming, and that his voice mattered, even if no one had told him so. He had tucked the letter into the folder where I kept the legal documents, as if he knew it belonged there, as if he wanted to be heard, not just loved, not just protected, but heard. I brought it to my lawyer the next day. Elaine read it without a word. Then she nodded once, slowly, and placed it into a new file labeled Jamie's statement. Does it count? I asked. In family court? She said, looking me in the eye. Sometimes the most powerful thing in the room isn't a law. It's a child who knows where home is. That night, I found Jamie on the porch swing, legs curled under him, reading his dog-eared copy of Holes for the fourth time. I sat beside him. You wrote something very brave, I said. He looked up. Did you read it? I nodded. He didn't ask me what I thought. He just leaned his head against my shoulder and whispered, I don't want anyone to take me from you. I wrapped my arm around him and held him close. No one's going to, I said, because now the court wouldn't just hear my truth. They'd hear his, too. The courtroom smelled faintly of old paper and floor polish. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and the hum of whispered conversations filled the air like static. I sat in the second row on the left, alone, clutching my worn leather folder, the one that held 10 years of motherhood in its seams. Melanie sat across the aisle, 3 seats over. She looked different. Tailored navy blazer, smooth hair pulled into a low bun, not a trace of her usual flair. Next to her sat a man in an expensive gray suit, her attorney. Confident, casual, the kind of man who smiled when he didn't mean it. They spoke in low voices, occasionally glancing at me. Melanie didn't smile this time, not even the fake one. The judge entered. Everyone stood. He was an older man with kind eyes and a stern mouth, the kind of face that had heard every kind of lie and waited patiently to be shown the truth. We took our seats. Rogers versus Hayes, custody petition review. The clerk read. Melanie's lawyer stood first. He spoke with polish and ease, presenting her as a reformed woman who had made youthful mistakes, sought therapy, and was now reclaiming her rightful place in her son's life. He used words like biological, parental rights, restoration of the maternal bond. He handed the judge a glossy packet, photos of Melanie holding Jamie as a baby, letters from her therapist, even screenshots of the online praise she'd received. I didn't look away, because none of that was the truth. When it was my turn, I rose slowly, handed over my documents, and cleared my throat. I don't have a fancy binder, I said, but I have years. I spoke calmly, no dramatics, no tears, just the story as it was. The sleepless nights, the first fevers, the report cards, the night terrors, the lullabies, the scraped knees, the hospital visits, the last 10 birthdays. I mentioned Melanie's absence, but I didn't speak poorly of her. I didn't need to. I spoke of Jamie, how he called me Mom, how he wrote a letter to the judge, how he chose me, not because he was told to, but because he lived it. Elaine stood beside me and delivered the legal foundation: guardianship by default, assumed parental responsibility, material proof of primary care, documented abandonment. The judge listened to every word, hands folded, expression unreadable. Then he asked only one question. Has the child expressed where he wishes to live? Elaine nodded. Yes, Your Honor. We submitted a letter in his own handwriting. The judge opened the file and read silently for a moment. The room was still. Melanie looked over at me then. There was no hatred in her eyes, just something that looked a lot like fear. The kind of fear you feel when something you thought you could take refuses to leave where it belongs. It started with one question. Elaine stood calmly, not a flicker of hesitation in her voice. Ms. Rogers, can you tell the court how long you remained in contact with Jamie after you left him with Ms. Hayes? Melanie straightened her back. I sent a few letters, I wasn't in a good place mentally. I knew he'd be safe with her. And after that, I wanted to come back. I just wasn't ready. Elaine nodded and paced slowly before the bench. Would you say you were more ready when you gave up custody of your daughter, Ava, in Maryland 3 years ago? The courtroom went still. Even the judge stopped flipping papers. Melanie blinked. Excuse me? Elaine handed a document to the clerk, who passed it up to the judge. Exhibit D, filed in the state of Maryland, August 2019. Termination of maternal custody. Child, Ava Marie Rogers. Guardian, maternal aunt. Grounds, abandonment and substance exposure. Melanie's mouth parted, but no words came. Her attorney stiffened beside her. Objection, Your Honor. That matter is unrelated. The judge raised one hand. I'll allow it. Elaine turned back to Melanie. Ms. Rogers, have you had contact with Ava in the past 2 years? Melanie swallowed. No. Did you inform the court in your original custody petition that Jamie was not your only child? I didn't think it was relevant. Did you tell Jamie that he has a half-sister he's never met? Silence. Elaine turned to the judge. Your Honor, we contend that Ms. Rogers has established a pattern, not of misjudgment, but of detachment. Her sudden reappearance in Jamie's life, after a decade of absence, coincides with online attention and public visibility, not a consistent rehabilitated maternal effort. The judge leaned back in his chair. He was quiet for a long time. Then he looked at Melanie. Is that true? He asked simply. Her lipstick had faded. Her hands trembled in her lap. Whatever mask she'd worn when she walked into this room, tailored, polished, rehearsed, was starting to crack. It wasn't like that, she mumbled. But it was. Everyone in the room knew it. Even her lawyer didn't meet her eyes. From my seat, I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just breathed. Because in a room full of claims and contradictions, the truth had finally started speaking for itself, and it was louder than any performance. The judge cleared his throat. By then, the courtroom had gone still. Papers no longer rustled, no one whispered, and even Melanie sat frozen, her lawyer shifting uneasily beside her. The judge opened a pale blue folder marked Child Statement, Private Submission. Elaine had insisted it be presented last. He unfolded the page slowly. No legal jargon, no notarized formatting, just wide-ruled notebook paper, pencil smudges, a 10-year-old's truth in crooked letters. He began reading aloud. Dear Judge, my name is Jamie Rogers Hayes. I'm 10 years old. My favorite food is chicken nuggets. My favorite book is The Lightning Thief. And my favorite person in the world is my grandma. But I call her Mom. She makes me feel safe. She knows when I'm scared, even when I don't say it. She always listens. Even when I talk about Minecraft too long. She tucks me in. She's never missed a birthday. She gives the best hugs. I don't remember my other mom. I know she had me, but I don't know her. I don't want to leave my house. I don't want to live with someone who doesn't know what I'm scared of. If my grandma has to go, I don't want to stay either. I'll miss her too much. She is my home. Please don't take me away from my home. Jamie. The judge folded the letter and placed it down slowly. No one spoke. No one moved. Even Melanie's eyes had filled, though whether from shame or sorrow, it was impossible to tell. I kept my hands tightly clasped in my lap, my nails digging gently into the soft tissue of my palm. I couldn't cry. Not now. Not yet. But in that silence, I felt it. The shift. The judge looked up, not at the lawyers, not at the documents, at me. Then at Jamie's letter again, and finally At Melanie. "This letter," he said quietly, "carries more weight than any document filed in this court today because it comes from the person who has the most to lose and the clearest understanding of where love lives." Melanie dropped her gaze, and I, for the first time in the entire hearing, felt something break open in my chest. Not fear, not anger, something gentler, something like hope. The judge returned after a short recess, though it felt like a lifetime. I sat with my hands clasped in my lap, back straight, not because I wasn't afraid, but because I had promised Jamie I would be strong. I had become stone for that boy. I wasn't going to crumble now. Melanie sat across from me, her arms crossed, jaw tense. Her lawyer whispered something in her ear, but she didn't respond. The judge cleared his throat. Everyone rose. Once we were seated again, he adjusted his glasses, glanced over the final pages of the file, and spoke. "In the matter of custody, regarding minor Jamie Rogers Hayes," he began, voice even, expression unreadable. "This court has reviewed all submitted evidence, heard testimony, and carefully considered the child's emotional stability, expressed wishes, and established home environment." I stopped breathing. He continued. "Biological parenthood, while a legal foundation, is not in itself proof of present-day capability or sustained commitment. The law recognizes not only the right to parent, but the act of parenting." Melanie shifted in her seat. The judge looked directly at her. "Ms. Rogers, your petition for full legal custody is hereby denied." Then, turning toward me, "Primary and legal custody of Jamie Rogers Hayes is granted to Margaret L. Hayes, the child's de facto guardian and established maternal figure." My heart beat so hard I could feel it in my fingertips. He wasn't finished. "Supervised visitation may be granted to Ms. Rogers, subject to the child's comfort and consent, under the oversight of a licensed family services representative. Any future petition for expanded visitation must be supported by evidence of consistent involvement and the child's emotional readiness." Silence. Then the sound of my lawyer exhaling beside me. I didn't cry. Not yet. I looked straight ahead, my hands still locked together, my spine refusing to bow, not even under relief. Melanie didn't look at me. She stared at the table in front of her like it might offer a way out. I stood, nodded once to the judge, and walked out of the courtroom. Not with triumph. With dignity. Outside, the afternoon sun hit my face for the first time in hours. Elaine turned to me, her voice low. "We did it." "No," I said softly, smiling for the first time in days. "He did." Because this wasn't just a legal win. It was the affirmation of a decade of love, sacrifice, and presence. And finally, it had a name. The words had barely left the judge's lips when Melanie stood up. So fast her chair scraped loudly across the floor, screeching like a warning. "Are you kidding me?" she snapped, her voice rising like a wave crashing through the quiet. "This is insane. She's not even his real mother." The bailiff took a step forward, but the judge held up his hand. Melanie's lawyer leaned in to calm her, but she shoved his arm away. "I gave birth to him. That counts for something. You're all blind." Her face was flushed, her voice shaking, not just from anger, but from something deeper. Panic. Defeat. She turned toward me, her finger pointing like a blade. "You took him from me. You poisoned him against me." I didn't respond, not because I didn't have words, but because some moments don't deserve them. Around us, the courtroom remained still. No one moved to support her. No one nodded in agreement. Even her own lawyer looked down at his notes. This wasn't drama. This was collapse, and it didn't need applause. She threw her purse over her shoulder and stormed out of the room, muttering curses, her heels clacking down the hallway like a retreating army that never had a plan to win. The judge simply sighed. Elaine leaned closer to me. Let her unravel. She's not your burden anymore. I nodded. Because for 10 years, I had quietly carried the weight of Melanie's choices, her silence, her absence, her unfinished responsibilities. And now she was finally holding her own consequences. Not because I punished her, but because I refused to let Jamie suffer for what she had abandoned. Outside the courthouse, the sky was open and blue. Reporters had gathered, small-town cameras rolling for the local evening news. Someone asked if I had a statement. I said only this. This was never about winning. It was about making sure my grandson didn't lose. They didn't need more, because the truth had already spoken, and the one who tried to rewrite it had just walked away. We didn't throw a party. No balloons, no cake, no grand announcements. Just a pepperoni pizza, half cheese for Jamie, and a blanket on the couch that had always been a little too small for both of us, but never too small for love. Jamie kicked off his shoes and curled up beside me, remote in hand. "Can we watch The Iron Giant again?" he asked. For the 50th time, I teased, nudging his shoulder. He grinned. "Yeah, it still makes me cry." I smiled and clicked play. The opening credits rolled, soft music filling the room. The same old couch, the same soft lamp. But somehow, everything felt new again. Not because anything outside had changed, but because we no longer had to worry that it might. Jamie leaned his head on my shoulder, the pizza box still open on the coffee table, crusts piled up like trophies from a battle won without bloodshed. "Grandma," he said suddenly, voice small and clear. "Even if the judge had said I had to go with her," he paused, "I wouldn't have gone." I turned toward him slowly. "I would have run away," he added. "I would have come back to you." My throat tightened. I didn't say anything. I just pulled him close, and he let me hold him longer than usual, his arms wrapping around my waist like he knew, really knew, what could have been taken and what had been saved. Outside, the world kept spinning. Inside, a boy and his grandmother sat on an old couch, watching a robot sacrifice himself for love. It felt fitting, because that's what motherhood had been all along. Sacrificing quietly, staying steady, holding on through every crash and every moment when walking away might have been easier, but never an option. After the movie, Jamie fell asleep with his head in my lap. I brushed the hair from his forehead and whispered the words I'd said 1,000 times before bedtime. But tonight, they carried something more. You're safe. You're home. And you'll never be alone. I turned off the TV and listened to the stillness. It wasn't empty. It was earned. The courthouse stamp may have made it official, but this was the real beginning. The following Monday, I called a local therapist who specialized in childhood transitions. Her name was Dr. Patel, and her voice on the phone was calm, steady, like a lighthouse in fog. Jamie didn't protest when I told him. He just nodded. "Will she ask me a lot of questions?" he said. "She'll listen more than she talks," I told him. "And she won't expect you to know how to feel. Just that you try." We walked into the clinic hand in hand. I filled out the intake forms while Jamie swung his legs from the waiting room chair. Under relationship to child, I hesitated for a moment. Then I wrote, "Mother." It wasn't a stretch. It was the truth that had been waiting a decade to be recognized. He disappeared into Dr. Patel's office while I waited with a coffee cup that had long gone cold. I glanced at the parenting magazines scattered on the table. None of them featured grandparents on the covers, but I no longer felt like I was wearing someone else's role. When Jamie came out, he looked a little tired, but lighter. "She has a sand tray," he told me, almost smiling. "And these little figurines. I made one that looks like you. It had a cape." "A cape?" "Yeah, you're kinda like a superhero." I didn't correct him. I didn't say that superheroes were younger or faster, or didn't have knees that popped every time they stood up. Because what he saw was what mattered. We drove home with the windows down. The radio played softly, something from the 80s. Jamie hummed along, tapping his fingers on the window. He didn't look back. He didn't ask about Melanie. He was moving forward. And so was I. Later that evening, I opened the file cabinet in my bedroom and placed a new folder in the front. Jamie, legal guardianship, Margaret L. Hayes. For the first time in 10 years, there wasn't a caveat. No temporary, no kinship care, no pending review. Just a name, mine, and a title I had earned, not through paperwork, but through presence. I wasn't just his grandmother. I was his home. The invitation came in a cream-colored envelope with gold lettering, Community Voices Honoring Everyday Heroes. Guest speaker, Margaret L. Hayes. I almost laughed when I opened it. Me, a guest speaker. But the principal of Jamie's school had insisted. "You've done something most people wouldn't have the strength to do," she'd said. "And we think it's time people heard your story." So, there I was, standing on a wooden stage in the school auditorium, beneath a banner that read, "Love Makes a Family." The room was full. Parents, teachers, students, even some of the board members. Jamie sat in the front row, wearing his blue hoodie, feet too big for his age, and eyes fixed on me like I hung the moon. I took a deep breath and stepped up to the mic. "I'm not a traditional mother," I began. I didn't pace hospital floors while waiting for his birth. I didn't pick out nursery paint or post sonograms on the fridge. I didn't carry him inside my body. I paused, but I carried him in every other way. A few people shifted in their seats. I held him through night terrors. I wiped away tears when other kids asked why his mom never showed up. I fought through doctor's appointments, math homework meltdowns, and 10 years of silence from someone who should have stayed. I looked at Jamie. He smiled. "I didn't birth him," I said, voice strong, clear. I became his mother. A hush fell over the room. "Motherhood," I continued, "is not a title awarded by biology. It is a decision, one made daily. In the quiet moments, the tired ones, the ones where no one is watching. And every day I made that choice. There were tears in a few eyes, even in my own. But this story isn't about hardship. It's about love. It's about the families we build, even when others walk away. It's about the kids who teach us more about ourselves than we ever knew." I ended simply, "My name is Margaret Hayes. And this is my son." I gestured toward Jamie. He stood up, crossed the stage, and hugged me in front of everyone. No cue, no stage direction, just love, walking across the hardwood floor with worn sneakers and open arms. And that hug was the only applause I ever needed. Because after everything, I hadn't just raised a child. I had been reborn as a mother.